The Last Jedi, arguably one of the most divisive movies ever created. Rian Johnson was
a movie that killed a franchise.
A movie that just derailed an entire trilogy, an entire
No, the franchise is the whole reason Solo bombed. You know, it's the reason they the Obi-Wan movie became a series, and you know all the I mean,
it's a reason they stopped making Star Wars.
Let me see your notes right there. Let me see your notes right there.
This one?
Yeah, let me see your paper. It's like, hey Matt, I have an outline here. This is an outline. You don't have to stick to it perfectly, but it has an outline for all the established characters and story arcs for the next 2 movies. I'm going to give it to you now. See what you can do with it.
I'm going to light it up and smoke it.
Yeah, pretty much. Flip it up and throw it up your back and down a hole.
Thanks for that, buddy.
Yeah, it's like thanks, but we're not going to need that.
In case anybody wants
some doobies with it, maybe.
Just in case anybody wants to argue that point, it has been said by multiple people, actors, directors, writers, that is exactly what Rian Johnson did with JJ's outline for the 3 movies.
You know, from what I've read, and I've actually dug into this as much as I possibly could, because I've written articles about The Last Jedi.
Short of actually calling Rian Johnson and asking him.
Exactly.
So I've wanted to do that.
So while Johnson was developing The Last Jedi, there was no completed script for The Force Awakens. So he didn't know what was happening with that movie while he was trying to write the sequel to it. And so at a certain point, he just said, F it, I'm going to do what I want. And then once we know what JJ's doing, we'll try to incorporate some of what he did into what I want to do. And so The Last Jedi being its own train wreck was directly attributable to the decision not to plan out the entire trilogy from the beginning. Because basically, Rian Johnson had to create a sequel to a movie that didn't exist yet. And he didn't know what was going to be in that movie. And so, you know, like they went through lots of different drafts, lots of different rewrites. And we got what we got, all because Kathleen Kennedy couldn't be bothered to take the time to properly plan out a trilogy.
That bitch, Kathleen Kennedy.
We got expressed by Matt Vader, his and his alone.
Star Wars franchise whacked him.
Killed her franchise, whacked it.
Can't convince me that it didn't happen.
Fucking Tiger King, man. Jesus.
It's infiltrated everything.
Bob Iger be smacking.
All right. So let's discuss our theatrical experiences of The Last Jedi. And I'll start because I got to say,
you got kicked in the nuts.
I really did.
That's it. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Honestly did.
Yeah.
So I got invited to go opening night, midnight showing, Thursday, whatever day it was that it came out, with a friend of mine, a coworker. I think I talked about him before. Me and him are huge film nerds. We throw movie lines back and forth to each other. He's like, hey man, I got tickets to go see The Last Jedi opening night. Do you want to go with me? I was like, abso-freaking-lutely. And I'm like, I know I have to work the next morning. My work schedule starts at 3 a.m. I'm going to go to a midnight movie of a movie that's 2.5 hours long and then just go straight to work. That was like, hell yeah, let's do it. Because I was still riding high. I still enjoyed The Force Awakens, still ready to roll.
You were like, what, 22 then?
Hook, line, and sinker, ready to go. So I go to this movie. I sit down in the theater. I'm watching it. I'm like, the opening sequence, right? We got the Yo Mama joke within the first 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay, that's a little weird.
That's a little weird,
but all right. The visuals are cool. Poe's doing his thing. You know, we got BB-8 doing a little slapstick droid comedy, kind of prequel-ish comedy going on. I'm like, all right, well, we're okay. Then we got Hux, who got his nuts snipped within the first 10 minutes. And I was like, ooh, man, I kind of liked Hux. That sucks. And then the moment...
Really?
Yeah, I did like Hux.
You liked Hux?
In the first one, yeah. With the dynamic that he had with Kylo, you know, them two trying to impress Snoke and constantly trying to throw each other under the bus. I like that. I did enjoy it. So
he got snipped.
He got snipped early on. And I was like, ooh, God, that sucks. All right. And the moment that kind of set the trend for the rest of this movie for me is the moment I think everybody just kind of cringes at, is the throwing the lightsaber over the shoulder. I was like, whoa. I was like, what? And at the theater, there was laughs in the crowd. The crowd laughed. Like, oh. And I was like, no, that's not funny at all. That was not funny. I was pissed at that point.
I let out an audible, what the fuck
Yeah.
in the middle of a crowded theater.
Yeah. That was me. Everybody else was laughing because it's a slapstick joke moment because the music cuts and it just plays like a comedy. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That's not supposed to happen. And then it goes farther and farther down. The further into the movie we get, I'm just like, and then once we got the Canto Bight, I was just, my buddy was telling me, he's like, I was looking over at you while you were watching this movie and you just looked like you were in horror. And I was like, yeah, sure was.
The Space Leia scene was the scene that cemented it for me.
For you? Okay.
Yeah, like the over the shoulder lightsaber throw, that was big warning sign.
Yeah.
The bombers that can't shoot vertically.
Well, hold on.
Horizontally.
By the time we got to Space Leia, I was already checked out, bro. It's like, wow.
I was trying to like the movie up to that point, and that was a point where in a crowded theater I said, "What the?" Yeah.
Let me get to I'll just skip to the end to where I was walking out of the theater and my buddy looked over at me. He's like, "Hey, what did you think?" And I was like, I don't know. I can't say at this moment. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not okay." And I drove home. I got home. My wife was still awake. She's like, "Hey, did you like the movie?" She was all excited because she knows how much of a Star Wars nerd I am. She's like, "Did you like the movie?" And I was like, "No." And she's like, "Oh, that sucks." And I'm like, something went wrong. I didn't exactly know how to talk about it.
That was how I felt too, because I drug my wife to the movie with me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience. I'm done, so go ahead.
And it was pretty much the same as yours. I was pretty much checked out before we even got to see Luke because of the slow roll bomber run and all that kind of stuff. I was just, and the mama jokes and everything. But, just to make a story super short, the movie got over and we're leaving. I'm super quiet. And my wife looks at me. She goes, "What is wrong with you?" And I go, "That wasn't a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
I don't know what I just saw. It was just
trash.
And and I'll admit I went back.
Yeah, I did too.
2 days later.
Yep.
Just to try and process what I had seen. I went by myself.
Can I laugh at both of you?
And I went by myself.
I only went the one time.
Just one time?
And I'll never watch that movie. I'll never give that movie another second of my life. Not even for this podcast. In fact, I'm telling you right now, I was going to say this earlier, you talking about the movie,
yeah.
It was like the flashbacks it was giving me was like akin to like the way I forgot how Father O'Flanagan used to molest me in second grade. It's that fucking bad.
Yeah.
Like, that's how terribly traumatic this experience was for me.
Dude, I'm like, did I miss something?
It's like that movie can't be that bad. It's a Star Wars movie.
No, like something was off with me. I gotta go. I went back. I watched it a second time.
It's like I'm thinking to myself now, wait a second. Even The Force Awakens had a couple cool moments in it. This whole movie was garbage from the start. It was unbelievably bad. And I just, who's Rose Tico? Okay. Why is Finn got water squirting out of tubes?
Oh my God.
Walking around at the beginning of his story, why is this casino slow motion space chase? Okay. Oh, Admiral Purple Hair. Okay. Space Leia Poppins. None of it made any sense. It was just ridiculous. And it's just, go ahead, Matt.
Who wants to go next with the theatrical experience?
I think we've covered the theatrical experience enough.
You guys, everybody basically
I just want to talk about this movie.
Okay,
okay. I mean, mine was slightly different because I had just had a surgery. So like December 6th, I had a surgery. This movie came out like 10 days later. And like, I wanted to see the movie, and I went and saw the movie at like kind of like a health risk to myself. And I literally left there feeling like I got kicked in the balls. And it was it's so traumatic. I've been racking my brain. I don't even remember who I saw that movie with, to be honest with you. It could have been anybody at this table.
I remember
I would not
every
remember.
freaking minute.
No, I have just tried so hard to delete it from my mind because not once, we can talk about the movie, Matt, because not once do I believe in what they did with Luke Skywalker.
It's funny. I think out of everyone at this table, I've seen this movie more times than
How many times
you
have you
guys
seen it?
combined.
How many times?
Yeah, probably.
I think I've seen it up to 8 times now.
Okay, I've seen it 4.
1.
2.
I saw it twice at the theater and I watched it. I've probably seen it 2 more times.
Why?
I've seen it
just because I knew this day was coming. And
I I remember enough from that.
Yeah, it was just. It
I
was
saw
like
it twice at the theaters. I did a full commentary. This freaking movie is the reason why I started this podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
I saw it a third time because we did a full commentary on it. Me and a bunch of buddies who all were kind of in agreement. We sat down, we watched the movie, and we recorded ourselves talking about it while we were watching it. And then I watched it recently for this podcast.
I mean, the only way I'll ever sit through this movie again is if this group here is sitting together in a room
Doing a
and
commentary?
we're recording a commentary for it.
But I think, the 8 times I've watched it, I studied it. I sat down.
Yeah, you're the
and
film guru.
Looked at the scenes. And to me, this is one of the most fascinating movies I think I've ever seen in the respect that it's so bad and poorly done. You could teach an entire class on what not to do when writing a story and making a movie based off of this movie alone.
Teach us a class about how not to make a movie, Kadish.
In less than 15 minutes.
I'm not going to be able to do it in less than 15.
We'll give you 30.
But I recently did a Twitter thread about
It's a great thread, too.
and it was about how Rian Johnson studied one of the most legendary filmmakers ever, Akira Kurosawa, because Akira Kurosawa was a big influence on the original Star Wars movie. George Lucas based A New Hope off of the story of The Hidden Fortress, which was one of Kurosawa's films. But Kurosawa was, this legendary filmmaker that George Lucas actually took a lot of his visual and stylistic, choices from. And it's no different than someone like Spielberg being an influence on a filmmaker nowadays or something like that. So we all have our influences, and Rian Johnson, he was a graduate of USC Film School, so he's someone who's used to like studying film and kind of breaking stuff down. And his movies up to this point, like Brick was kind of like a breakdown of postmodern noirish detective tales and set in high school, so it's kind of like a mismatch type thing. Looper was kind of like a science fiction deconstruction of time travel movies and stuff like that. So he's kind of a wonky film geek, Rian Johnson. And I dug into the Hidden Fortress and Kurosawa when we were talking about A New Hope, and I kind of went further down that rabbit hole just for fun because I find Kurosawa fascinating. And I found that, as I was watching some of Kurosawa's stuff, I was like, wait a minute. I recognize this. This was in The Last Jedi. And if you look at The Last Jedi from purely a technical point of view, in terms of like the visual style that Rian Johnson decided to go with, it's heavily influenced by Kurosawa films. The color choices, the costume design, the themes. Like Kurosawa was a very kind of cynical filmmaker, and he actually was quite nihilistic by the end of his career. Like he'd fallen on hard times in the 1970s, and he tried committing suicide and all this other like really dark stuff. Like his wife died during the filming of one of his movies, and he just felt like he was, kind of losing it. And like all of his friends were dying, and his career had kind of like dried up. And so like his final movie, his final epic, not his last movie, but the last big movie that he did was this film called Ran. And loosely translated, that means like chaos. And it's kind of like a retelling of the King Lear story from Shakespeare, in the sense that it's about this tragedy about a ruler whose kingdom gets torn apart by his sons in a civil war. And it's one of Kurosawa's only color pictures, and it's also considered to be his masterpiece. And if you study Ran and you look at how it was filmed, the colors, the stylistic elements of it, almost beat for beat, Johnson uses these techniques in The Last Jedi. And he even uses Kurosawa's techniques of incorporating weather elements into the background of his shots to add movement and emotion to otherwise undramatic scenes. Like, every scene that you see, like with like fire raining down in the background or wind kicking up, like, the final fight between Luke and Kylo, there's smoke like wafting around in the background. That's something right out of Kurosawa's playbook.
So is he influenced, or is he just stealing technique?
I would say he's influenced. I mean, like he was as influenced by Kurosawa as
George
Lucas was when he was making A New Hope.
And that's one of the things where I kind of push against people who are like, oh, it's just a ripoff of this. Like, well, everything is a ripoff of something else. So I don't like that mentality of saying that a filmmaker is ripping off another filmmaker when literally everything that we love in geek culture is just influenced from something that's before our time.
But this is one of the big issues, is that like J.J. Abrams does not put this much effort into conceptualizing his movies. And if you look, like I watched The Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker back to back. And even though they all look pretty, The Last Jedi stands out in terms of the quality of its...
cinematography?
Well, I was going to say a very stupid filmmaking term that you guys aren't going to understand. It's mise en scène.
Ooh.
Mise en scène.
Which basically translates to what's on the screen.
Okay.
That it's a term that kind of incorporates everything that shows up in a movie.
I love that shit. I love it.
It like The Last Jedi, in terms of its mise en scène and its conceptualization, is very sophisticated. It's a very sophisticated directorial choice movie. Whereas when you compare it to JJ's movies, JJ doesn't even come close to reaching that level. So I have a weird newfound respect for The Last Jedi, even though I still think it's a terrible, terrible movie in terms of story structure and in terms of storytelling. What Rian Johnson did with his writing in this movie, because he took this very cynical take on Star Wars, and his creative choices for this film completely destroy a lot of what came before it. Mm-hmm. And that's inexcusable. It completely destroyed the character of Luke. It created retroactive plot holes in the entire franchise with the Holdo maneuver. The whole Leia Poppins thing where she's flying through space, that is a perfect example of the violation of Chekhov's gun, which is basically like, a rule of efficient storytelling. If he had just had one line where Leia said, back when I was training to be a Jedi before I left, Luke's Jedi Order or something like that, if they had just established that she had actually trained to use the Force before that scene happened, it would have been fine. But they didn't. So it came out of nowhere.
I still don't think it would have been fine, personally. But that's just me.
It would have been justified.
I will argue, in me personally, that scene didn't break things for me. Like, I was actually surprised at the reaction to that scene from a lot of people, because, I mean, she's freaking Darth Vader's daughter. She's Anakin Skywalker generation. Luke Skywalker is one of the strongest Jedi in the world. His sister, makes sense that in a life and death situation that she would be able to pull herself out of it. However, I will argue that simply, I'm only going to say this one thing. I'm not going to spend 20 minutes defending this stupid scene. I will argue that it's more the delivery of that scene than it is actually the physics and the lore behind it.
It just came out of nowhere.
The idea that Leia can use the Force should not surprise anybody.
No, that's not the idea that surprises me. It's just in the cold vacuum of space, your eyeballs should explode pretty much immediately. But,
this is a fantasy. This is not science fiction. This is not Star Trek. So I would argue that doesn't have any credence.
Fair enough. Here. But I also, while watching it, thought, dear God, why am I watching this? But what I was actually thinking in that moment was, why? I mean, no, seriously, why? Why not? She's dead in real life. Just this would have been the perfect spot to kill the character.
Yes. Okay, that's a good point.
Why? Why
because
not?
At that point,
that's a perfect spot.
We knew that that Carrie Fisher had passed away. Rest in peace, Carrie Fisher.
And it would have been way.
And honestly, if it was actually Kylo that would have pulled the trigger, I think that would have even been
and that would have been easy to change in post.
Man,
I know
that
how
would have
I
been
would
a strong moment.
Yeah,
I know how I
killed
would
his mom and his dad.
Go ahead, Matt. What's up?
I know how I would fix that scene.
How would you fix it?
I would fix that scene by not having her emanate any force powers. I would fix that scene by having, it's a trap. What's his name?
Akbar.
I would have had Admiral Akbar push her through the door and close the door before getting sucked out into space.
That would have been good.
Sacrificing himself.
Way better, Dad.
That would have been a strong
Instead of just
scene.
being some random dude that got sucked out into space during the same scene.
Yeah.
Because then he would have had his moment, would have died. Oh, God, Admiral Akbar died. And he would have saved Leia.
I like that a lot, but man, why aren't you working for Hollywood, man? What the hell?
Why weren't you on? Never mind.
But that's just me.
Okay, that's a great idea.
I like your movie better.
My biggest problem with the Disney trilogy and modern movies in general is that these directors and storytellers, they come up with set pieces that they want to shoehorn into their movies, and then they try to adjust the story to justify them being there, as opposed to actually having them be a natural outgrowth of the story. Like, let's just talk about the opening bomber scene for a minute.
This is a big sticking point for me.
Typically, as a writer, if you're going to do a battle scene like the one at the beginning of this movie, you would sit there from a meta point of view, like the 30,000-foot view of someone observing this battle. And you would say, okay, what are the attackers doing? Now, based off of that, what would the defenders do? Based off of that, how would the attackers respond? And you would go through beat for beat how the battle operates until you get to the end of the battle that you want to happen. And then you would sit there and you would look for holes, or you would look for reversals, or you would look for, ways in which things could be, wrenches could be thrown into the mix. And that's good storytelling. That's just good practice. You could tell that Rian Johnson didn't put hardly any effort into how he wanted this scene to play out, because the military strategy in the scene doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But you could tell that he wanted to have a set piece where he had a World War II style bombing run on, the German U-boat or whatever it was. And, that goes back to his influence of, he was like, well, George Lucas based the final scene in New Hope off of
World War II dogfighting.
Sorry.
You said J.J. Abrams' name, or you said Rian Johnson's name.
Yeah. Off of George Lucas's, World War II dogfights in A New Hope. And so he was like, well, I want to pay homage to that by having my version of a World War II bombing run. Yep. And so he created these bombers that make absolutely no sense within the context of the universe or in outer space. But the funniest thing was when I was rewatching this, like there's a scene where, Poe is talking to BB-8 as he's making his assault on the dreadnought. And he's like, we got to get rid of those cannons or our bombers are toast. And I'm like, well, your bombers are toast anyway, because as soon as they launch their TIE fighters, they're dead. Yeah. And the whole aspect of there being gravity in space.
Okay, hold on.
with those bombs.
Continue on your point, but I'm going to argue this one stupid nitpicky thing that people pick apart is the dumbest criticism of this scene. But other than that, I completely agree with you. So go ahead, continue on, and then I'll defend the stupid bomber thing.
You don't have to do that.
I'm going to. Because
really
it's dumb. It's dumb. Dude, magnets, springs, literally anything to make something go down. And then once it's in the vacuum of space, it will just continue to go down. So the idea, you can't drop bombs in space, that's the stupidest argument for this scene. There are so many other dumb things that he already pointed out about this scene that make no sense. To nitpick the freaking bombs dropping is the dumbest shit you could possibly think of.
Did you watch how they dropped?
They go straight down.
They dropped like they were at a B-17 flying over Germany.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
Yes,
They go straight down, and then the ship continues forward.
They rattle.
Because the ship, at 2 miles per hour, slowly got to the center of the ship, and then the bomb bay doors open.
Yeah.
And then they go through the whole thing, where she's got to kick the wrench or whatever.
And how did
And then
dramatic.
she pushes a button and the thing releases.
Yeah.
And then they fall.
Yeah.
And how is she able to still breathe when
Yeah,
those doors
There's
are
obviously a force field there.
Yeah.
Force fields have
I'm
been
okay with the
established.
force field, but it's just the dumbest fucking thing I ever
It's
saw.
not a good scene. However,
I understand what you're saying.
the bombs dropping is a
not,
nitpick.
That's not how space works.
And so many people get
That's
hung
not
up.
how Star Wars works.
So many. Yeah, they should
So
just
if
have
there's
a
a force
Y-wing.
field,
Where's the Y-wing?
If the bomb's dropping from within the confines of the ship at first, where there is an artificial gravity before it hits the force field, it already has the inertia of that motion. And then once it crosses through the threshold of the force field, it's just already moving in that motion, and the vacuum of space
Yes,
is
I
going to carry
understand.
it. in
But
the
how is
same
it able to
direction.
pass the force field?
But I don't know. That's fucking
I don't
made
know
up
how do TIE
science. I'm
fighters.
just talking about
cares?
How
physics.
do ships fly through the force field at the hangar bay doors?
Yeah.
That's a Star Wars thing. It's fine.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
But still, it's just
I'm just
the
saying
whole concept of that scene where they're slowly moving in, at like 5 miles per hour. And,
I'm sorry.
How did
I got
that
heated.
one ship survive the onslaught of the TIE fighters?
And in addition to that, why didn't Hux's ships, which weren't that far away, why didn't
right there.
Why didn't they launch all their TIE fighters to go and support the defense of the dreadnought?
I'm glad I didn't watch this movie more than once.
Okay. I cannot defend the military strategy behind this scene because it makes no sense.
Also,
whatsoever.
Like, there's this one ship hovering over your whatever that's going to blow up the entire dreadnought if all the bombs hit in this one spot. It should just blow up one spot.
I could understand like if these bombers were like heavily fortified, like you could take 1,000 TIE fighters and it still wouldn't damage the armor on these heavy, big bombers. I'd make sense. But these things were like tissue paper.
Yeah.
And
Like-
what's worse is in terms of military strategy, when the dreadnought comes out of hyperspace and they target the planet first as opposed to the ships that could escape at any moment, it's like from a military standpoint, the planet's not going anywhere. You could shoot at that anytime. So you prioritize the target that could get away. And so you would think that, to add some stakes to this, they would be targeting the fleet, and that would actually justify Poe's, attack on this thing, because he's like, if we don't take this thing out, our fleet's toast, because for whatever reason we can't go to light speed yet. And just from the attacker's point of view, it makes more sense strategically to go after the targets that are at higher risk of getting away than hitting the planet. And this is the type of thing where if a competent storyteller had been writing this movie.
Exactly. Tell us that new T-shirt again, Matthew Cadis. What's that new T-shirt again?
I chalk it up to bad writing.
There we go.
But
Amen.
But this movie is full of scenes like that are just problematic to their core.
Yeah.
Because they were not well thought out.
Yeah.
But you know what's interesting is like when you watch this movie, there are little details that are in this movie that justify a lot of these bad decisions. Like if you look at the final scene where Luke is fighting Kylo Ren on Crate, there are shots in that scene that show that Luke is not leaving footprints.
Yep.
And if you're not I didn't notice this until like my 8th watch.
Really?
Okay. Yeah.
Oh.
So like there are little things in this movie where if you're not paying enough attention at the time that they're shown, you completely miss it. Like for instance, when DJ overheard Finn talking to Poe about the Resistance's plan of escape, I missed that the first couple of times I saw this movie, and so I always wondered how did DJ know what the Resistance's plan was in order to betray them to the Empire? To me, that seemed like a plot hole, but there's one shot in the movie where they show DJ reacting to hearing this information when he's in the shuttle with Finn, and it's like just a couple seconds long. Okay. So if you're not paying attention, it's very easy to miss.
Yeah, I felt that same way because my most recent rewatch of The Force Awakens, there was actually a line in there, and for the last couple of years, I was kind of like caught up in this whole social media negativity about The Last Jedi and why Luke was on this island by himself. There's a line in The Force Awakens where Han says Luke felt responsible. He walked away from everything and disappeared. Like that's in the movie. So and he's actually, it seems like he's got a chip on his shoulder about it. Yeah. Like for the longest time, I felt like it was a Rian Johnson decision to take the story in that direction. But when I rewatched The Force Awakens recently, I was like, oh shit, no, this was like lightly established. Like there's a way you could work around it if you wanted to, but
no, I think it was established. I just think it was also one of those decisions, like he said earlier, like about them trolling the fans. It's just like, Luke wasn't.
Yeah.
He's in the first movie for 3 seconds.
And the most egregious scene in this entire movie was the whole Canto Bite subplot.
Okay.
You could have easily cut that subplot out completely from the movie, and it wouldn't have affected anything.
No, I say that all the time. He's absolutely right. You totally can.
Take the whole thing.
No,
take the whole thing out.
I agree.
Has no effect.
I don't consider it the most egregious. I consider it the most unnecessary to the plot. To cut that 15 minutes out. The most egregious scene in this entire movie is Luke sucking on that alien sea capsule.
No. Okay. It's Luke firing up the lightsaber about to kill his kid, his nephew.
Okay, let's talk.
That would not have happened.
Because I feel like this is probably going to take most of the Last Jedi discussion time out of it. So let's just.
That's all I'm going to talk about.
Let's talk about Luke. Let's discuss Luke. What happened to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, and why does it upset so many friggin' people? Because this is gonna take the rest of the podcast.
Their hero into a space hobo.
Okay.
Basically, is what they did.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Well, they also completely contradict the character that we've all known and loved for over 30 years.
Let's take it from a character standpoint. So, the last time we saw Luke Skywalker, he had redeemed the second worst person in the galaxy.
He's pretty bad. Baby killing, planet killing, woman choking.
Exactly. Yeah. So Darth
Jedi
Vader,
killing.
the guy that every other Jedi had given up on, right? Obi-Wan Kenobi gave up on Vader. Yoda gave up on Vader. Everybody was like, this dude's evil to the core. We need to kill him. That's our only option. Luke Skywalker said, no, there is still good in him. I will save him. And if I won't save him, it'll be because I sacrifice myself. That's where I'm going to take this. That character, that's the last time we saw him. There's no other backstory to it whatsoever except for that little segment of news from Han saying a Padawan of his turned to the dark side and he walked away from everything. That's the only line of dialogue we have as far as character development from where we last saw Luke to when we see him in The Last Jedi. Kadish, what the f*** happened to Luke Skywalker?
Well, Johnson chose to do this trope of like the fallen mentor, the fallen hero, which is, when done correctly, it can work. Mm-hmm. But the thing about Luke's character has always been that his character embodies hope. His character embodies the impossible, hope against all odds. And if you even look at his introduction into the franchise, episode 4, it's entitled A New Hope. And that's a direct reference to Luke. Luke is the character that, is the undying optimist. He's the one who believes against all odds that he can achieve the good that needs to happen in order to save the day. He leaves his training early to go save his friends. He defies all expectations to save his father. He's willing to make the ultimate sacrifice of his own life in order to redeem his dad that he's never known, who basically everyone has given up on, that is lost. Mm-hmm. He is the thing that, for millions of young men growing up, he is the ideal of the hero. He is the character that we all aspire to be. We all aspire to be the embodiment of hope, not just for ourselves, but for our friends, for our families. And Luke, to an entire generation, represented that. And Rian Johnson, for some reason, decided to take a piss all over that and basically say, oh, you thought this guy was a hero? No, he's a loser. Ray's the hero. This guy's time is done. He's old. He's forgotten. You can't save everybody. And I'm going to show you through my interpretation of this character that is the reality of the situation. And it completely negates everything George Lucas set up, everything that people loved about this character of Luke. And it cheapened his legacy and it betrayed an entire fan base. And that's why people despise this movie so much, is because it broke Star Wars in so many different ways.
Okay.
All because of this.
Luke Skywalker would have never, ever done that. Yeah. Ever.
Nope.
Oh,
and done what? Explain what you're talking about.
Okay, the scene where he's standing over Kylo Ren in his sleep and he turns on his lightsaber and he has the thought to kill him. That would have never happened. Even like he says, it was like a split second or what. Yeah. I haven't seen this since it was in the theater. You guys have rewatched it. I'm sure I'm kind of getting it wrong. This is my general takeaway. All I remember is Luke Skywalker would have never, that lightsaber would have never come on. That thought would have never crossed his mind. The Luke Skywalker I knew is I can save him. Like he can be redeemed.
And even if we accept the fact that Luke did that, okay, the idea that he would have, just withdrawn from society, withdrawn from the fight, and just wanted to go somewhere to die instead of, desperately trying to redeem himself and make up for his mistake and rescue his nephew.
Yoda did it.
That's okay. So that's
Yoda did it, but Luke was different. Luke was supposed to be different. He supposed to like he would have never.
He's taking the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, like if he had made that mistake, he would have never stopped trying to fix that mistake until the day he died.
So I mentioned this in the last podcast where we were talking about the original trilogy. Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy was meant to be seen as the best version of a Jedi possible. He was better than Yoda because he believed in that redemption. He was better than Obi-Wan Kenobi because he believed in that redemption. That's a staple of his character. So watching him do that, where he even for a split second didn't believe that Kylo Ren was redeemable, was so shockingly different from any other version of the character that we've ever seen that it just, for a lot of people, it didn't make sense. Now, what I want to do...
never given up on a member of his family.
Never. And I think I even tweeted what you said. Like Rian Johnson just pissed all over the legacy of Luke Skywalker.
So
he really did.
In the interest of not making this podcast sound like a giant circle jerk, I do want to represent at least portion of the fandom who believes that it's reasonable to assume that Luke is not perfect and that he would make that mistake, and that he actually did correct himself in this movie. Better late than never, I think, is the only way I can describe it, where he actually tried to redeem his mistake by showing up at the end to save the rebellion and save his sister as this force projected version of himself, to stop Kylo from killing the Resistance, from killing Leia, from killing everybody in that base. So, in my personal feeling towards that is that it wasn't enough. That's not how that should have went down. Now, that's, somebody could say to me, well, that's your version. That's what you wanted to see happen. What happened in the story was this, and you just don't like it because it's not what you would have done. Like, how do you guys feel about that? Because I see it all over the internet. The only reason why you don't like The Last Jedi is because it's not what you wanted to see.
No, not at all. It's just because it doesn't make any fucking sense. like I don't care about the canon. Like, for me personally, and I've said this to so many people for years now, I don't care about any of the other stuff. It's the Luke. To me, it's all about Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker, that would have never happened. And in fact, I don't even have qualms with him becoming like Yoda. You know, my whole issue is he would have never done that. He would have never given up hope. That lightsaber would have never come on. That kid would have never, because it's like that time paradox in any kind of time travel movie. You know what I mean? Had Luke not had that vision and not turned on it, had his doubt and turned on that lightsaber, and Kylo Ren not woke up to see it, would he have felt like the betrayal to lead himself to the dark side? Like, it's just like, it just would have never happened. Luke would have never done that. You know?
I was just going to say, this entire saga is supposed to be about the Skywalkers.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about this in the next segment, but Rey isn't a Skywalker. She's a Palpatine, right? So the fact that she wasn't a Skywalker somehow is just repugnant. It's just, if they're going to give her the name, she should have been
Luke's, and they could have. They
Luke's
did that.
kid or whatever.
They did that in the extended universe. He could have had he could have had a lover. They could have had a child. He could have had some kind of vision like he did in the cave about Vader, where he sees like the Padme thing, and that's what led her.
But
so he had to turn it away.
Johnson specifically didn't want her to be a Skywalker. He didn't want her to be special. He wanted to.
Yeah.
He wanted to kind of, I guess, decentralize the power of the Force and give it to everyone. So that nobody's special, and that's just part of his nihilistic kind of take on. Well,
that's,
Star Wars.
I mean, that's like in The Incredibles. You know, if everybody's special, then nobody is. Like, that's a tagline from that movie.
But getting to your question about the people saying like, well, you didn't like it because it's not what you wanted to see.
Yeah,
I mean, that's why people don't like stuff, is because they don't want to see it. But to answer your question, it's not that I don't like it because it's not what I would have liked to have seen. I don't like it because it's not consistent with what I've seen before.
Okay.
It's not something that it's not something that carries over what's already been established. And it's a complete 180 in terms of Luke Skywalker, because we haven't seen Luke Skywalker in 30 years, but we know that in the face of certain death, he refused to cross over to the dark side because he knew it was the right thing to do. So when you have a character that basically, does a mistake that creates a new Darth Vader that kills all of his students and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. The idea that he would just withdraw and retreat and like let the war go without him. So like, the First Order, like his mistake balloons and basically screws off the entire universe. That's not something that the Luke we know would ever do.
Well, I agree with that, but I also...
because of that inconsistency that people have a problem with the way that Luke Skywalker is treated.
Take it a step back, though. Do you think it's consistent that he would have that thought and turn on that lightsaber? Because I don't think any of that stuff would have happened. And therefore, that's why I'm like, I don't even want to waste my time with that argument.
I agree, but in terms of like, okay, if we just accept that happened and this was the mistake that created Kylo Ren and set this whole thing in motion, it's like I'm willing to accept that, but I'm not willing to accept that Luke wouldn't try and fix that he would just kind of go someplace because he wants to die and withdraw from, saving the universe.
So it's just twice as bad.
What I would have liked to have seen was that, okay, Luke withdraws to this island and he's waiting for someone to find him because he knows that in order to find him, the Force is going to be strong with that person. So he's looking for, he knows he can't save Kylo himself, so he's looking to wait for the Force to send him someone that he can then train to do what he can't. And that's why he withdrew, because he was waiting for something, as opposed to, oh, I'm taking myself off the board. I'm
So like your movie better. It's better than throwing the lightsaber over the back.
There's also, yeah, exactly. There's also a moment in this movie that I feel like I may have been able to accept everything that was presented to me, including the scene with Luke, which again, because of that inconsistent narrator, or what was it? What's that? Unreliable narrator thing that Rian Johnson was trying to use. Is that Luke could have not done what we see, but because of it was from the point of view of Kylo, what he saw, what his interpretation of the events could have been a misunderstanding. And that's what was set off this motion. And then Luke, again, I almost could have seen Luke doing what Obi-Wan and Yoda did and saying, okay, I need to take myself off the board so that I can't be used to further damage things or damage what's going to happen. And I can trust in the Force to right this wrong. And when the time comes, I will spring into action like Yoda and Obi-Wan did. And I will train the person to do something that I can't do. There's a moment in this movie that I would have been able to accept everything that happened. When he goes to the Falcon, when Luke goes into the Falcon and he sees R2-D2, and R2 like lights up and he's so happy to see Luke, and Luke is like, R2, and it's that was
one of the best scenes.
The most genuine Luke Skywalker moment in this entire movie was that interaction with R2-D2.
Probably the best scene in the movie.
Yeah, and he shows. I'm drank too much whiskey. I'm going to tear up. When R2-D2 shows Luke Skywalker the
Princess Leia,
help me Obi-Wan Kenobi moment. If he would have just done a 180 at that moment, I'm Luke Skywalker again. That triggered that memory, that triggered me to be the man I used to be. If everything from that moment on would have been Luke saying, okay, Rey, let's go do this. Let me show you how to be a Jedi. And not be like, well, let me show you why the Jedi need to die.
Then we'd all be talking about how R2 is the real hero.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he kind of is. He is the saga.
So like if that moment would have done the 180 and Luke would have went full on, leaned into like training Rey and going and confronting his mistake and confronting Kylo Ren and I have to go save my sister. Like I would have been like, okay, the rest of the movie can go fuck off. Canto bite, whatever. Yeah, leave it in. Who cares? If that moment would have been the deciding factor for Luke, I would have been like, I freaking love this movie.
I just wanted a Luke and Rey training montage. You know,
That's it.
No, you got a Rey and Rey training montage.
Yeah, right.
One of the real tragedies of this movie is we don't get to see Luke react to hearing about Han's death.
That's in a cut scene. They deleted it. It was in there.
That's true.
They filmed it.
I really, really wanted a scene with Luke riding around on the back of Rey.
Like that picture.
Doing flips and stuff. Yeah, that would have been awesome.
Mark Hamill actually posted a picture of them
during the filming. Everybody's all excited.
Yeah.
Like,
That'll be awesome. Yeah, do it.
But every subplot in this movie is problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Like Poe's subplot where the admiral refuses to tell him the story and it leads to a mutiny. A Finn's subplot where it's basically, you could remove it from the film and not change anything.
Yeah. Finn got done dirty in this movie.
Like the whole force Skyping.
4 hours, baby.
the force Skype power being introduced. It was kind of funny rewatching this because in the one scene where Luke is kind of training Rey and he's like, what do you think the Force is? And she's like, well, it's something that you use to lift rocks. And he's like, that's not what the Force is. And then like at the end of the movie, she's like, she uses it to lift rocks.
So
and it's like, wow. Okay.
I actually want to say something about that because people say like, oh, Rian Johnson doesn't understand the Force. I'm like, honestly, to tell you the truth, that scene where Luke is describing the Force and they have that little like violence, cold, death, life, like that little sequence where Rey is discovering what the Force is on the island and what it means and what creates it. Like that was one of the better explanations for what the Force is. Like apart from Yoda talking to Luke and describing what it is, like that scene, I felt like was pretty on point.
I think one of the real issues with this movie is its timetable. It's basically part 2 of The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And it all happens over the course of like 18
36 hours.
Yeah.
So
and it was just too too short of a time period because basically Rey was with Luke for like 2 days. And everyone, I mean, that's really not enough time for a Jedi to be trained.
No, at the bare minimum, Luke was with Yoda for I think 2 weeks.
Well, she doesn't have to be trained because she's got absorption powers.
Yeah, she downloaded her
Downloaded it with her
abilities.
force
But she does. Oh, it's funny because in the
I know kung fu.
exactly
That's
yes.
it.
So
Matrix.
which is bringing that up, like in the Force Awakens, where we talked about like she downloaded the Force powers from Kylo, and then that's what kind of set her on her course and gave her her abilities. But then in this movie,
that's still headcanon.
in this movie, yeah, it's in the novel, but whatever. In this movie, it kind of goes back where she like doesn't understand the Force anymore, and she has to go through the whole training thing again. It's just an inconsistency because these two movies really aren't that connected.
The biggest issue here is like stuff happens in the third movie that should have happened in the first movie.
We'll talk about that.
Like Rey training, Leia being set up to have trained as a Jedi.
Yeah.
A bunch of stuff that they actively realized, oh, these are plot holes. We should try to fill them by the third movie.
Yeah. Well, I have an argument about that, and we'll talk about it. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about The Last Jedi besides Luke?
I could go off.
I know you can, but like
He's not allowed to speak.
the important stuff.
We're 2 hours and 5 minutes in.
Yeah.
I told you guys we had an hour and a half. And we're not even to the third movie yet.
So anything else about The Last Jedi besides Luke that we would like to
the
address?
Holdo maneuver.
Ooh, how about Admiral Gender Studies?
Okay, so let's talk about Holdo for a minute.
So apparently it was a 1 in a million chance.
Oh, look.
Okay.
Look on his face.
He's so
like,
done.
oh, God.
So done. Okay,
Danny,
so
what did you think about the Holdo maneuver when you first
I'll be
saw
honest
it?
with you. I thankfully don't even fucking remember it.
Really?
Oh wow! Like I
thought-
like, you guys don't understand. I wasn't kidding about the whole molestation thing. I rate this up there with that painful
we
memory.
don't have to
I'm
talk.
trying not to remember.
I'm just saying.
No,
Okay.
you guys finish. I don't know why. I got to use the restroom
I
again.
do too.
I do too, yeah.
Oh
Okay,
wow!
so let's finish up
Bunch
real
of old
quick.
men with
Holdo
tiny
maneuver
bladders.
breaks the entire
Breaks everything.
right?
Yeah.
I
Everything.
liked visually. I thought it was friggin' awesome.
I love
This is the
Visually,
part
it's
where they're running out of gas, like in Battlestar Galactica.
It's the part.
after
It's the
that.
part where Holdo goes to light speed.
And
Yeah.
okay, now I remember that.
Okay.
That was kind. It looked cool.
It looked cool, right?
cool.
But it broke everything we know about Lightspeed.
Yeah.
Even in Rogue One, which came out after.
No,
right?
it came out right before.
Did it right before?
Yeah.
When everybody was going to Lightspeed trying to leave Scarif, and Vader's ship came in, and they were halfway through Lightspeed, and they just crashed into Vader's ship. Like there's inconsistencies all over the
they
place.
weren't in halfway into Lightspeed. They were
They were
getting ready to go into Lightspeed.
You don't think so?
No.
Oh, am I? Okay, maybe.
No, that's what happens when a ship comes out of Lightspeed right in front of your face, and you crash into it.
Okay.
So yeah.
So that doesn't break that canon?
No.
Okay. But the Death Star run, like just take a...
No, the Holdo maneuver breaks everything.
Yeah, the Holdo maneuver basically, it makes you wonder, okay, if a ship going at light speed can have that type of destructive force against a fleet, why didn't in the Battle of Endor, right before a capital ship was about to be destroyed, why didn't Admiral Akbar say, hey, why don't you save us a bunch of trouble and just light speed into that fleet over there?
Or just put some Lightspeed engines on some asteroids and plow them into the Death Star.
Yeah. Why do you need a Death Star when you could just have like a light speed missile hit a planet?
Yeah, that's it.
What's the T-shirt again, guys?
I'll chalk it up to bad writing.
There we go.
It's terrible.
All right. Real quick.
Yeah, it actually retroactively creates plot holes in the franchise, which I had never seen before.
I did appreciate how JJ retconned it in the next movie.
Yeah, but his
was a
retcon
one
was
in
the
a million.
laziest retcon ever.
What else was he
Absolutely.
Okay, if you were given that movie and you say, hey, figure out a way to explain how this happens, what would you have said?
I'd have had the bad guys create new shields that prevented it.
It's like, yeah. I think it's funny because JJ went into that movie.
That doesn't
He
explain-
probably had a sheet of paper, like 6 or 7 things that he had to fix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From that.
Well, that's
abysmal
okay.
movie.
All right, one of my
But let's talk about that in a minute after we have a bathroom break. Okay.
One of my personal favorite tweet threads that I ever made was somebody said that nothing about the Rise of Skywalker retcons The Last Jedi.
Oh, bullshit.
And I went through and I said, Exhibit A, Kylo Ren's helmet. Exhibit B, like the light speed
Holdo
ramming.
maneuver.
The Holdo maneuver. Exhibit C, the Knights of Ren.
The big problem with The Last Jedi is basically it feels like the end of a saga as opposed to the middle part of
Yeah,
the
I mean the way it ends with the other kid, and it's like I fucking hate that movie so much.
Room boy.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the Battle of Crate and how problematic that thing
salty.
is.
Where I got my name from.
Yeah. It's
All right,
red.
guys.
It's red.
It's a beautiful fight.
Yeah, it's cool.
Oh,
So it makes
there's a
zero
moment.
sense.
Okay, so for the longest time, and I have to admit I was wrong. I'm going to say this for everybody who hates me on Twitter.
You're always wrong.
Shut up, Kadish. There is a moment in the movie where Poe Dameron says, okay, we've activated the shield. Now they can't hit us from orbit.
Yeah, it's another one of those details that if you're not paying close attention to the movie,
Yeah, but God, they landed those
for the-
walkers way the hell out there.
So did they. They did the same thing in The Empire Strikes Back. So for the longest time, I was like, this battle doesn't make any freaking sense because why didn't they just hit him from orbit? It's never established that they have a shield. I was hardcore. I was like, this movie, it's stupid. I was wrong.
When did they?
It's just-
when did they take the shield generator out?
They never did. They just walked through it.
So
It's just to prevent an orbital
strike
attack.
Yeah.
They opened up the shield.
so the battering ram
it went
laser
through the
goes
shield.
through the shield.
Yeah.
That's why they had to advance before they could turn it on.
Exactly. So I was wrong. Like the Battle of Crate, as of right now, makes as much sense as The Empire Strikes Back.
The funniest thing to me is like they're in these super maneuverable speeders and they're going in a straight line right at like the encroaching force, where it's just like, hey, why don't you split off and do a flanking maneuver? Those things can't turn sideways all that quickly. Come up from behind the battering ram and blow it up that way.
They just wanted to make pretty red contrails.
Yeah,
behind
no,
their
they
ships.
wanted to make a pretty shot, and because what's the T-shirt, Mr. Kadish?
chalk
Chalk
it up to bad writing. Yeah, like if Rian Johnson had just spent like 3 minutes actually thinking through his battle strategies, like he might have written a better battle strategy.
If he would have,
But the whole idea that like Poe Dameron learns his lesson and says like, oh, we can't do this suicide run because even though if they this is the last stand, and even if they get that battering ram off, we're all dead. Like that was one of the dumbest decisions I think I've ever seen in the history of film.
I have a big problem with the message of this movie, right? The singular message that goes through this movie time and time again is self-sacrifice is not the way to go, right? So Paige Tico, the Rose Tico's sister who sacrifices herself to destroy the dreadnought at the very beginning of the movie, Leia's like, we sacrifice people to win a victory that we should not have done.
Oh, Alex, you're not going to win fighting what you hate.
Okay, so that's the other thing too, right? So
You're going to win saving what you love.
continue on. Again, Finn trying to sacrifice himself to save the rebellion, to save the resistance. Nope. Rose Tico's like, nope, that's a bad thing. Don't do that.
Who?
Rose Tico. You have her action figure, sir.
I got it for $1, $2 as a
General Holdo.
What was it?
Sacrifices herself.
Vice Admiral.
Whatever. Sacrifices. What the is this Vice Admiral?
that's what you get, purple hair.
It's a female admiral.
Sacrifices herself to save the rebellion, right? This is the same theme. Paige Tico sacrifices herself. Vice Admiral Holdo sacrifices herself to save the rebellion. Finn tries to do it. All of a sudden, it's a bad thing. Nope, can't do that. That's against our code. We need to save what we love. And then Luke Skywalker sacrifices himself to save the rebellion. Like there's such this inconsistent message about what is okay to sacrifice yourself for and what is not okay to sacrifice yourself for.
I like how Poe has to figure out what Luke's plan is instead of Luke just saying like, oh, by the way, I'm doing this to buy you guys time to escape before he goes out there.
I do have one question.
Go ahead.
Just one?
How did Luke give Leia the dice when he was a hologram?
They disappeared.
Did they disappear?
Yeah, they disappeared.
Okay, never mind.
They were a hologram.
Edit that out
also.
because I don't remember.
They were a tangible hologram that she could hold.
It was just like Luke. The
That's
dice.
pretty good.
It's a pretty good hologram.
Well, they showed Luke getting the dice from the Falcon.
Right, I remember that. That was the R2 scene.
And so like he gives the dice to Leia, but it's force projected dice. And so after he dies, they disappear.
Like I'm okay with new force powers. I think new force powers are cool. Like I grew up playing the video games, and the video games were just like they had force powers galore. But when they,
Well, yeah, but those all kind of made sense in a first-person shooter game, but they're not being used as MacGuffins as a plot point in the movie.
Yeah. Like force projection, I like they did set up the fact that Kylo early on when he was talking to Rey was like, you don't have the power to project your.
I mean, come on, let's be real here. I mean, if you don't want to play a first-person shooter game, when all you can do is choke somebody and say, these aren't the droids we're looking for.
There's mind
Ooh,
tricking.
that's a fun game.
Decades of pent-up jealousy that Star Trek has transporters and Star Wars doesn't. So they wanted to solve that argument by saying, Jedi's
totally
can
gonna do
force
this.
project.
We're totally doing a Star Trek episode.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Nemesis is a unsung hero in that franchise.
Shut up.